It's still crazy to me saying this, but in the recent reveal trailer for Pikmin 4, the game was shown to have a little bit of a new perspective. Today, I want to talk about that perspective's history in the series, and I would also like to talk about the connotations it could potentially have for the gameplay of Pikmin 4. My name is Vantage Emblem, and today we're going to be talking about the peculiar new perspective of Pikmin 4. So without further ado, let's get into this. Since the series' inception, Shigeru Miyamoto has expressed interest in displaying the individuality of each Pikmin through the game's visuals. That being said, in the GameCube, this was physically impossible to do because of the resolution. This led to the controls having several different zoom settings so you could be in and out of the action. You could play completely top-down for the most tactical situations, and you could play zoomed up when you wanted a closer look at the action and at the Pikmin. In Pikmin 2, they added a setting where you could hold one of the triggers to zoom in right behind your captain and get a close-up, basically behind-the-back perspective of the action. You couldn't really play the game like this, though. In Pikmin 3, the camera's angle was set. However, this wasn't really much of an issue because of the new HD visuals, which allowed the player to be able to see more of the Pikmin from farther away. In addition, there was a first-person camera feature that could be accessed through the code pad. However, this was limited. You could not control the game while in this first-person mode. That was basically a decade ago, and visuals have advanced a lot since then. Pikmin 4, it is still crazy saying that, has the most advanced graphics in the series thus far, by far, and we can tell that just from the first trailer. We also are shown a behind-the-back perspective, which is more than just a visual change this time around. Shigeru Miyamoto claimed this as a new way to play Pikmin and also presented it alongside streamlined controls. I believe fully that this will fundamentally change the way Pikmin is played while still keeping the core of the series intact. First, I do not believe that this perspective is forced, but rather toggleable, like the perspectives of Pikmin 2. I think this will allow the player to be able to switch into an up-close mode for battles while switching into a more tactical, zoomed-out mode for overall management. This would allow battles to be more dynamic than they are in Pikmin 3, and that's for the better. I think Pikmin 3's battles typically come down to being rather simple, other than the boss battles themselves. I think even a simple fight against the Bulborb now would have more dynamic nature if you would have to, say, aim Pikmin at the eyes from a behind-the-back perspective, like a third-person shooter or action game. I think that this new perspective, however, has to be balanced with the overall tactical nature of the Pikmin games, and the real-time strategy elements are still going to be emphasized through being able to zoom out. That's my expectation anyway. This approach allows for better combat and also a more immersive perspective while not ruining the strategic bits of Pikmin. I ask you to consider the following. Imagine you have a squad of different Pikmin types. Assume some of them are winged Pikmin, yellow Pikmin that have different properties. They have very different verticality compared to other Pikmin types. Now, pit yourself against a traditional Pikmin enemy such as an Arachnorb, a beady longlegs. As you are fighting against this enemy, in a normal Pikmin setting, you don't really get to capture the scale of the enemy. Combat is rather simplistic. All it is lining up a crosshair and throwing. I know that's an oversimplification, but consider it this way. In Pikmin 4, perhaps you could still fight the enemy that way, but if you were to switch to the new perspective and gaze up at the towering monstrosity that stands above you now, you could see a weak point that you could throw Pikmin from, only from that Pikmin-sized behind-the-back perspective. Imagine fighting a flying enemy and sending your winged Pikmin up into the air to have an aerial battle above you while you fight smaller enemies on the ground with your other types of Pikmin. Different Pikmin's throwing arcs could be very pronounced this way. Purple Pikmin may actually be nerfed without having to be nerfed by having a different niche when they're in the traditional Pikmin perspective versus when they're in this new zoomed-in mode because of their lower throwing arc. Meanwhile, Pikmin types like Rock Pikmin would have a similar change to their niche in this mode, as would Yellow Pikmin, giving Yellow Pikmin yet another utility. Red Pikmin and Blue Pikmin would be old reliable. There are other reasons for this change as well. If Pikmin 4 is an open world, or at least has more expansive worlds, there is a chance that this change was done to create immersion and to allow the developers to easily blend and make it clear where you can and cannot go from a movement perspective. For example, from the traditional Pikmin perspective, you would have a top-down view of the area, but you don't really know the bounds of where you can go in a larger, more expansive area. From this perspective, you can look to the borders of the area and see approximately what's going on in these larger spaces. Matter of fact, that seems to be what is going on in the shots we have from the trailer, which seem to be a larger, interconnected area in some sort of backyard. This would allow the new areas to be fresh, and it would also allow new enemies to be fresh and old enemies to get new perspectives. For example, imagine fighting a blowhog of some sort and being able to clog its snout by throwing a Pikmin directly into it, kind of like the armored cannon beetle from Pikmin 1. Or imagine fighting an armored cannon beetle from Pikmin 1, but in a new HD format where you have to physically aim in a Pikmin to its hole to be able to plug it to open up the back. There's plenty of things you can do with this new system that allow for it to be a interesting over-the-shoulder aiming option while still keeping the tactical gameplay intact. That being said, there's not really too much to go off of in this department in this first trailer, but I'm certain we will see more about it before the game releases, hopefully sometime next year. They said it's sometime next year. I'm hoping. Anyway, I'll stop rambling and end this here. Thank you all for watching. Please, please tell me your theories about Pikmin 4 down in the comments below. I am planning on compiling them into a Your Theories On video at some point soon, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Take care.